Hello and welcome to week 4 of the Paolo Falzone trial. This week we will hear of more witnesses that have known Paolo Falzone. We will hear his parents and ex-girlfriends, including his current life partner and the mother of his child. We will also hear from Antonino Falzone's family and girlfriend. As a reminder, the verdict in this trial is expected on the 12th of June. Day 1. We begin with Alfio, the first witness. He's a hairdresser, barber, and he has already had Paolo as a client. He says, "I was his hairdresser. He was always very calm, withdrawn. I never had any long discussions with him. It was always the same hairstyle, so there was no need for long conversations." Living in the area and having his business in the city of Morage, he recounts some of the incidents with Paolo Falzone. He says in the area where his ex-partner lived, he was already screeching his tires. He had a minor altercation with a former customer. Several people complained about his speed and he was annoying everyone. He was a real danger. He had already been warned by the residents, even though there were any fights. He was known as a speeder. As soon as I learned the make and model of the car involved in the tragedy, I immediately thought of him. In town, there was only one car like that. Regarding security measures, Martine Bass, the court president, asks him again to talk about the directives and mentions Article 5, which, according to her, requires placing a signaler behind the carnival procession and not behind the crowd. To clarify, the carnival procession includes the people that have a costume on and then there's the crowd behind them. They usually don't mix and they follow each other. First, the people who are wearing a costume and then the people walking behind in the crowd. The witness says, "Since then, we've seen a change in attitude. Now we're required to have a car behind us. But in that specific case, there would have been more deaths because he would have driven into the car and the car would have driven into people. For me, it wouldn't have changed anything." Now we're going to hear about Mathieu. Mathieu went to school with Paolo Falzone studying mechanics. He too is a fan of mechanics and he also knew the car that the accused was driving. Mathieu says, "He was an arrogant, very self-confident teenager. His parents were well off and he looked down on others. He was quite pretentious." Master Mayence asks Mathieu to explain the carnival. The president also asks him for details about the organization. He says the fairground attractions are already set up beforehand. The carnival doesn't really start on Sunday. Trailers are already being set up a little bit before. Everything is set up a week in advance. It's always been the case and it's the same every year. Master Mayence then asks the presidents to ask that question to Paolo Falzone. Paolo Falzone says, "I didn't see anything, neither the trucks nor the fairground workers." Paolo Falzone's lawyer says that this communication regarding safety states that people walking should be walking on the right side of the road, and they should only take the space of half of the street. The court president asks, "Has this not been put in place?" The witness says, "Not really, but the conditions were really good, so it's possible to not have marshals. Drivers are always polite and slow down. In 2022, there were no specific measures taken to signal the presence of the group, but they were put in place after the tragedy." The witness concludes with this comment by recalling the location where the deceased victims and the seriously injured people were found. He says, "On the right side of the road, right? That's where they should be? But if everyone had been there, the number of victims would have tripled." Then we're going to hear about Stéphanie. Stéphanie is not a civil party. She works for the city of La Louvière, and she works for the city festivities and events department. She was working that specific job when the tragedy happened, and she still has the same job. She's not speaking on behalf of the city, she's just explaining how things were back in the day. She says, "We talked about the carnival a lot on social media. We distributed flyers in people's mailboxes, and we held a press conference, while also sharing information through our digital platforms. We also printed and sent posters for shops, but they weren't that big." A member of the jury takes the microphone to get clarification on the timing of the communication. She says, "For local residents, it's 10 days before the event. If we do it too early, they forget about it." The town newsletter is published at the beginning of the month. On social media, we post regularly from the start of the season. For 3 months, we have events every week. We split the communications according to the weekends. We communicate all the time about all the carnivals and the pre-carnival celebrations. What she means is, because La Louvière has many sub-cities, she has a bunch of events to handle for 3 months, and it means that every weekend or during the week, she only has to make communications about the sub-city that is going to have carnival celebrations. But overall, she says that during 3 months, they have a lot to do communications-wise. The court president asks this person to specify which social media platforms are used. And she says Facebook, Instagram, and the city website. The local police also use it for the weekend schedule and traffic information. And this means that whatever this person publishes as a person working for the city of La Louvière is official information. The lawyer of Paolo Falzone intervenes and asks, can you tell us if this little flyer or leaflet was distributed on the street where Mr. Falzone's parents lived? The city worker says the resident's notice is only about the security perimeter. The street that the parents live on is beyond the security perimeter. The city newsletter, however, is distributed to the entire city. This means, to clarify, because I guess this is not a common thing outside of Belgium, we get monthly little newspapers in the mailbox. Everybody gets it. But if there's an event that is going to happen on your street, in your neighborhood in general, you get an extra paper telling you which streets are going to be closed, what to expect during that day, etc. On day 2, we will hear the parents of Paolo Falzone. Silvana, Paolo Falzone's mother, is called to the stand. The president asks her about her son. She says, before this tragedy, I had a family. We were discreet and never had any problems with anyone. I raised the children as best as I could. They were calm, obedient, and polite. Paolo is a very reserved, quiet boy, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have feelings. He does, but he doesn't show them. Regarding the personality of Paolo Falzone, she says this. He's very kind. He has a heart of gold. He didn't have many friends because we moved from one city to another and he lost touch with several people. She explains that her husband is more cool and relaxed than she is. She says, we live in a time when raising children is not easy. I didn't want my children to be delinquents and smoke pot. The court president asks her if Paolo has any passions. She says he loved cars. He talked about them with his dad and spent hours washing his car. He didn't go out all the time though. The court president explains that the vehicle seller claims that Paolo went alone to choose the vehicle and its configuration. Paolo Falzone's mother claims the opposite. She says, I let him choose the options, but it wasn't really his vehicle. However, he was the one who drove it most often. He was the one who went to the maintenance appointments, yearly checks. He managed everything regarding the vehicle. The president asks his mother if she had access to Paolo Falzone's Facebook account. She says no, because I wasn't friends with him on Facebook. I knew he was posting some pictures of the BMW thanks to my daughter. The president asks if she has seen anything else on Facebook regarding the car. She says, I didn't have time to check his Facebook. I was protective of him. I told him not to drink too much and not to drive too fast. I know that during the night he would push it a little. To me, he was driving 80 or 90 instead of 50 kilometers an hour. The court president asks if she was aware that he had increased the engine power of the BMW. She replies, if I had known, I would have said no. The president clarifies that the husband knew about it. She says, I found out when the police came to our house to question us after the accident. I said I didn't know. My husband then told the detectives that his son had asked him. He had said no, but Paolo did it anyway. I was angry with my husband when I found out. Silvana explains that her daughter saw what Paolo sometimes did at night behind the wheel of the car. I told everyone who knew that I was angry with them for not telling me anything. The president explains that a witness heard on May 22nd stated that one night Paolo Falzone was doing his usual circus act of doing rodeos in the street. The court president tells the story of the angry neighbor again, and the mother of Paolo Falzone says, I don't like thieves or liars. It was a Sunday, my husband had gone shopping. He explained to me that something had happened with Paolo and that we needed to see what was going on. When we got there, the neighbor said that Paolo had made inappropriate gestures toward his wife. He was actually telling an anecdote about a woman and he misinterpreted Paolo's gestures. Silvana claims that this witness is a liar. She tells the president, you believe that everyone tells the truth. She recounts her phone call with Paolo at 5:10 after the tragedy. He was saying, Mom, I killed people. I'm going to prison. I ruined my life. I'm sad. He was screaming and crying. I called 112 to say that my son had been in an accident. The court president asks what exactly he told her. She says, he told me he'd had an accident, but I don't remember the exact words. All I wanted was to go and see what was happening. My husband and I arrived at the Rue des Canadiens, where the accident happened, and there we saw a lot of people. I wondered what they were doing outside. My husband parked near the nursing home and I got out because I had my son on the phone. I saw all these people on the ground. The further I walked, the more people I saw. I didn't want to shout too loud because I didn't want people to recognize that I was the driver's mother. The president explains that the police were shocked to find that Paolo Falzone's father's only concern was the condition of the vehicle. Paolo Falzone's mom says that's false. The only thing we wanted was to see our son to find out what really happened. My husband thought my son was in the car and that's why he went towards the car. Silvana regularly visited her son in prison. The judge asks if he had ever spoken to her about a video he had made. She says, no, he never spoke to me about it. He told me he regretted what had happened because he hurt a lot of people. The president talks about the fiancée of Paolo Falzone at the time he was in jail. She says, yes, Lucie. That's not her real name, that's the name she uses in front of the court. He met this girl shortly before the accident. She wrote him a letter in prison. He asked her to come to the house. I told him no. I called this girl and she said, I'm coming. She trapped us. She tricked us. For 6 months, for my son's sake, I kept quiet. My daughter, who lived with me and saw everything from the outside, didn't speak to me for 6 months because she could see that this girl wasn't sincere. The president of the court explains that Lucie does not seem to have the same version. The president then says she got caught up in a situation that was completely beyond her control. When she wanted to break up, you pulled all the stops, saying her son would kill himself if she left him. Silvana denies this version. She says that's not true. I would be the worst grandmother. She says, my son deeply regrets driving at that speed. Every day in the car he cries after hearing the witnesses. He cries because he destroyed these people's lives. Master Gelet, one of the lawyers for the civil parties, has a question for Paolo Falzone's mom. He's talking about the woman who was driving the vehicle that crossed path with Paolo Falzone that night. He asks why she sent this woman a friend request on Facebook this week, the week that she testified. Paolo Falzone's mom says, I know that one day this week I was watching the witnesses go by. I know I made a mistake. I wanted to look up who that person was on Facebook. The lawyer says, it was a happy coincidence that the request happened 5 minutes after her testimony. And the mom of Paolo Falzone says, I was following the live stream. The witness, Silvana, explains that she made a mistake and immediately removed the friend request on Facebook. However, the screenshot shows that 4 hours later, the request had not been removed. On a side note, what's going on here is that the lawyers of the civil parties is suspecting that Paolo Falzone's mom was trying to talk to one of the witnesses or bribe one of the witnesses, and she basically added them on Facebook right after they were doing their testimony. So that was a little suspicious, but again, we cannot prove any intentions. The hearing continues and Salvatore Falzone, Paolo Falzone's father, is called to the stand. The court president asks him if he knew that his son had increased the engine power of the BMW. He says, initially I told him not to do it, and once he did it, I was informed. She asks why he did that. He says it can reduce fuel consumption, and it was also for the short bursts of acceleration that he did from time to time. The court president asks if the dad was aware of what he was posting on social media. He replies, I'm not on social media. The president asks him to recount the episode where Paolo Falzone's neighbor complained about his behavior. He confirms his wife's version of events. He says the neighbor explained that several people had a party in front of the house once around 5 a.m. Paolo was there. My son apparently made a face at the camera and his neighbor thought it was meant for his wife. The presiding judge recounts the neighbor's version of events. She says that the neighbor spoke of Paolo Falzone's dangerous driving. The dad says, this witness is a liar. The court president asks if he's the one who collects the mail at home. He answers yes. She asks another question. You were on the scene on the day of the incident, where the BMW was stopped. Do you remember how it happened? He says, my son had told my wife that he'd been in an accident. My daughter helped Paolo locate where he was. When I saw all those people on the ground bleeding, it was horrible. The court president asks him to describe his attitude when he arrives at the scene. He says, I didn't care about the car, I was looking for my son. I was asking where the car was because I thought my son was in it. I wanted to see how my son was. According to him, the police misinterpreted his behavior that day. The public prosecutor asks Salvatore Falzone if he has ever received any police reports in his mailbox, any fines, anything. He says, yes, in the name of my daughter, my son, and sometimes in my own name. I would then give them the fines. It was up to them to open them and look inside. Katia Falzone is called to the stand. She's Paolo Falzone's sister. She describes the defendant's personality. She says, we had a happy childhood. We were often together when we were little because our parents worked a lot. We were together every day after school. We watched movies together. He's a quiet person, but he's always had a big heart. When Paolo Falzone was on the phone with his mother, Katia was in the room. She says, he kept repeating, Mom, I killed 2 people, I'm going to prison. Katia visited him several times in prison. The judge asked if she received any explanation from her brother. She says, no, he was in shock, he didn't speak the first time. He was just sitting across from me, he was crying, he never gave any explanation because I think he never realized what had happened. He never told me he was making a video and never told me how fast he was driving. Master de Becco, the lawyer for one of the civil parties, points out that the accused admitted to having seen people flying at the time of the collision. When he's on the phone with his mother, what state does he think the people he saw flying were in? The defendant replies, I didn't see what condition those people were in. My windshield was completely cracked. I didn't see anyone flying. The president explains that he nevertheless claimed to have seen people flying when she questioned him on the first day of the trial. She says, the truth of the first day is not the same as today's, so what is the real truth, I ask you? On day 3, the girlfriend of Paolo Falzone is expected to testify. Lucie is the first witness to take the stand. Lucie is not the current partner of Paolo Falzone. She is the one who was engaged to him while he was in prison. She's the one that her mother talked about earlier in her statement. So Lucie is coming up to the stand, and at the request of the president, she recounts the context of them meeting. She says, we met on Facebook, he added me, we exchanged messages for a few days, we only met once, and we went to eat at a restaurant. After the accident, his sister contacted me again because Paolo wanted to hear from me. She says, everything was fine, I had a 3-year-old daughter at the time, so I was hesitant. I had kept my distance, and then when he went back to prison, his sister contacted me again, and I went to see him in prison. He told me what happened, it wasn't intentional. He said he never wanted to kill people, it wasn't his intention, he felt guilty and he regretted it. The president asks her to talk about his relationship with Paolo Falzone's family. She says his family are respectful people, initially things went well. It wasn't a stable relationship, it wasn't the lifestyle we wanted, I was just there for him. The president then asks her what happened when she returned to Paolo Falzone's parents' house. She says there was a minor altercation. Her mother perhaps thought I was there for the money, so I ended the relationship because I felt pressured. She says I was receiving money envelopes from Mom. If I had wanted to take advantage, I would have stayed. Some friends of Lucie told her that the relationship was toxic. She herself describes Paolo as possessive. She says, when I told him I wanted to stop, he slammed his fist against the wall at the prison during an unsupervised visit. He was even taken to the hospital. I was scared. She testifies that she received calls after the separation, that people came to ring her doorbell, and she cut ties. She didn't want to know them anymore. In her statement, she said that Paolo left her 100 missed calls, which was indeed noted by the investigators. In her testimony, Lucie explains that she felt bought, manipulated. The goal was to present Paolo in a better light with a child. Another ex-partner of Paolo Falzone is now taking the stand. Her name is Cathy. Again, not her real name. She says, we knew each other for a while, we went out a few times. She describes the Paolo that she knew. She says, as a result of his upbringing, he created a world for himself in which he had no friends. He was unliked by everyone because of his appearance. In her testimony, she explains that he was considered a spoiled, rich kid, always well-groomed. His image does not correspond to the man he is. She adds, he was the laughingstock of everyone. He compensated with his car and his appearance. Master de Supoli, the lawyer of Paolo Falzone, asks the witness to clarify her remarks about what she thinks of Paolo. Apologies in advance, this is a literal translation of what she said. She says, he's not a bad guy, but he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. She remembers another moment when she was at Paolo's house. He showed me his house, upstairs. He pushed me onto the bed, telling me that I was gonna end up with him anyway. I clearly told him no, that I don't want to be with him. Then came the threats, the insults, the calls, the violent messages. For example, he said, "I'm gonna put your head in the air fryer." So I decided to block him and I never heard from him again. Now is the time for Paolo Falzone's current partner to testify. She explains how they met. In 2024, he added me on Snapchat. We talked every day for a month, and then I went to meet him. I already knew who he was because we had been in contact on Facebook, but nothing more. When the tragedy happened, I thought to myself, I know him, I know who he is. She explains why she became pregnant so quickly. I immediately told Paolo that for health reasons I couldn't use contraception myself, so we both knew that it could happen. We were in an agreement. I was 38 years old, I wanted to start a family, and he did too. On April 29th, I took a test and it was positive. According to her, Paolo was very happy when he found out. He was very happy. He immediately wanted to tell his family, and at the same time I was introduced to his relatives. They were so happy that they cried. She says, "I waited until the baby was born to move in with him. It's going very well. He takes great care of the baby. His parents helped us. His dad buys the heavy stuff, washing machine, things like that. They do a lot for him, but I buy everything. The milk, the clothes, that's me. Paolo contributes through his parents, but I have a salary, so I take care of stuff as well." We continue with the family of Antonino Falzone, the parents, sister, and brother-in-law of the accused. They're all being heard together. The older sister starts. She says, "He's our brother, we're here to defend him, but in our opinion he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's a normal person who never meant to hurt others." Regarding the charge, failure to assist a person in danger, his sister explains, "He helped a relative in the past and has been hospitalized for several days because of it. If he had been convinced he could do something, he would have done it." She adds, "I try to put myself in his shoes. As a human being, how can one react? I'm convinced that if he could have, he would have helped. I'm speechless. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time." We continue with Antonino's current partner, who is the mother of his son. She says, "I met him in April 2023. At first I didn't know who he was. After several weeks he confessed to me that he was the passenger. He asked me if I wanted to leave. I told him the passenger wasn't to blame. We continued the relationship. Then we had our son. He's a very good father. When I went back to work, he was the one who took care of him." She discussed the night of the accident with him before. She says, "That night he told me that he was asleep and lost his composure. He keeps a lot bottled up inside. He has trouble expressing himself. He's always very upset. It affects our daily lives. He can panic easily, but overall he's a good life partner." That was the end of the 269 hearings from all the witnesses and civil parties. In the next video, I will cover the pleas of the lawyers of both sides, as well as the plea from the lawyer representing the government and the interest of society, the equivalent of the public prosecutor. So thanks again for watching this video. Please make sure to subscribe and like the video if you want to get notified about the next video. I will try my very best to publish the final video before the verdict, but it's getting kinda tight in the schedule. But anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.